So we're going to go ahead and start this now. We're going to be going over making a website on Codecademy. We are in Lesson 1, What are HTML and CSS? This will be an introduction. So if you guys already know HTML and CSS, then this video will probably be pretty basic for you guys, but it's still good to refresh and whatnot and so forth. So let's just begin. So, site structure. What are HTML and CSS? All websites use HTML and CSS. After learning both of these languages, you will be ready to build your own website. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It's used to give websites structure with text, links, images, and other fundamental elements. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It's used to change the appearance of HTML elements. So let me just try and summarize a little bit of this. You could think of HTML as like just the text, without the size or the color or the type of font. HTML gives websites the structure. So you can have lists, you can have paragraphs, you can have headings. So it gives our website structure. It's not necessarily the style or how it looks. That's where CSS comes in. Instructions. An individual page of a website is referred to as a web page. Notice the web page in the web browser. During this lesson, we will explore the HTML elements used to build it. Click Next to learn about the anatomy of an HTML element. So if I click Next here, we have site structure. Let's explore the basic anatomy of an HTML element. Line 9 of index.html contains a heading element. So we have this file here, index.html, and you could basically on your desktop create this file and just call it index.html. You should be able to open it with your browser of choice, and it would probably just be blank, especially if you don't have no code in there. But once you start putting some HTML code in there, once you open it, you should be able to look at it if you use proper syntax. So let's look at line 9 of index contains a heading element. Line 9 is here. We have an H1. You're building a website, and we see it here. You're building a website, and it's our heading element. All HTML elements begin with an opening tag. In this case, the opening tag is, we have our H1. 2, most elements require a closing tag. It says most elements, denoted by a /. In this case, the closing tag is, and we have our H1 closing tag here. 3, the website user only sees the content between the opening and closing tags. Note, there are several other HTML elements in index.html in addition to the heading element. Don't be alarmed. We will encounter most of these in more depth during the lesson. So 1. In index.html, change the text that appears between the H1 opening tag and the H1 closing tag. Click Run to see the next or the new text shown in the web browser. So I could go inside of here and simply change what's in here to Jose Moreno's website. You could put in your own name, or we could run this. And we have our heading here. So let's go next. Add a heading. Now let's learn more about the heading element. Headings are frequently used HTML elements. You can think of them like headlines in a newspaper. Your eyes may notice headings first because the words are large and bold compared to other text on the web page. There are 6 heading elements: H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6. H1 is the largest heading, H6 is the smallest. Quick thing I should point out, you shouldn't use H1 to make text bigger, and then H6 if you want smaller text. We'll get into sizing our text in the following lessons. Right now, just understand that the H1s through H6 are made to convey importance, and that's how you should use them. H1 should be headings, and we got subheadings, and so forth. So I totally forgot that I am live, and I should probably open up my chat over here. I'm going to try to do that in my other window and see if this works. Okay, sorry for that, guys. We go over here. We're here now. Logging in. I'm not sure if anybody has any questions. That's why I would like to make sure if there's anybody on there that I can talk with you. So I got the live chat now. Okay. Let's see. So we got the live chat. Let me just say something. Welcome everyone. Just to make sure we're on live here. Okay. So let's continue. Add a heading. Now let's learn more about the heading element. Headings are frequently used HTML element. You can think of them like headlines in a newspaper. Your eyes may notice headings first because the words are large and bold compared to other text on the web page. There's 6 heading elements, H1 through H6. I feel like I already read this, which I did. Let's go to the instructions. Use the largest heading to indicate the name of the website. In index.html, one line below, body, type, don't copy, paste the code below. So, click run. Okay, so they want us to, in index.html, one line below body, which body is here, the opening body. There's a closing one here, and then we can see we could tell by the /. So right under there, we want to do an H1 and do Ollie bike sharing. Closing it is very important. We close it. So now if we run this, we should see our heading here. If I make this straight, you guys can see it off. It's on one line, but it adjusts as we close this. We'll learn more about that in the following lessons, but let's go to number 2. Use an H3 heading to create the tagline for Ollie bike sharing on the next line. So H3 on the next line, we got here H3, share your pedals with the world. Closing this now. Click run to view the tagline in the web browser. Notice how the tagline is smaller than the main heading because it's in an H3 element. Feel free to change the text to the heading and tagline of the website. So let's just do something like the text. So we change the text of the heading and the tagline. Let's do this. Learn. Let's do code questions, and we'll do share your questions. Receive your answers. Happy face. Just put some random. We go ahead and run this. And let's see, we did pass that. So let us go to the next lesson. We have add a paragraph. So with add a paragraph, the web page now has a heading and a tagline. Next, we will add a description of the company. The HTML paragraph element P is used to hold one or more sentences, just like paragraphs in an essay or a book. So we have here a paragraph tag with a closing paragraph. Oh, hi Cookie, how's it going? Hello. So let us see, let's use a paragraph element to add the company description. Below the H3 element, add a paragraph element that contains a description of the company. Here's an example. So we have a paragraphs element that they want us to do right under our H3. So we can go ahead and type that in here. Need a set of wheels while you're in town. Use Ollie to pair your perfect vacation with a stylish, affordable bike rental. We close our paragraph. So this should appear right under our subheading. If I was to go ahead and run that, we do get our paragraph right under. As you guys can see, let us go to the next lesson. So we have anchor elements, and anchor elements is another word for links, which just allow us to link to different pages on the internet or on our own page. So nice work. The web page is starting to come together. What if you wanted to link users to a different web page? The HTML anchor element makes it possible to do this with a single click. So we have an anchor tag here and the closing part down here. It has this attribute, href, which is a hyperlink reference. We put in where we want them to be able to go when they click it. And here we put Google. So anchor elements use an attribute to link users to websites. Attributes customize the behavior or appearance of HTML elements. So we are customizing what happens when the anchor is clicked. Let's see. Anchor elements use the href attribute, which specifies the web page to link to. In the example above, the text, click here for Google, links to google.com. Important web addresses such as http://google.com have a technical name, URL. So our instructions. Let's create an anchor element to send visitors to a web page that lists cities where Ollie bike sharing is available. Between the opening P and closing tags after the last sentence, enter this text. So between the opening and closing tag after the last sentence, which is here, they want us to type, here is a list of cities where you can find us. Period. Run this. We did pass. Number 2. Next, use an anchor element to link the word list to the URL cities.html. Here's and then we have our anchor tag. If I zoom out a little bit, it might be, nope, still. See, that kind of makes it easier to see, but let's do it. Next, use an anchor element to link the word list to the URL cities.html. So here is and then where's the word list? Oh, here's a list. So we want to add our anchor inside of, so it's not letting me write. That's weird. I'm not allowed to type in the editor. Let me try to let me see why I cannot type. So I can type on my other screen, but here I cannot type. I can erase, but I can't type. So let me see if I can reset this. Now I can type. So let's do this again real quick. Let's create an anchor element. Okay, so we just want to copy this and add it here. Run this. Next, use the anchor element. So here is a list. We want to do that. And they just want the word list. So we end it there. We do want to add now our href inside of here, which is going to link to cities.html is within all these site folders, so we don't need to specify the full URL. When you have added an anchor element, click run. So we're just going to put cities.html because it is a local file. We run this. We did pass. And now if you guys see this, if I make this bigger, we have this link here and it goes to the cities.html. And let's see, let us go next. Let me zoom out a little bit. If it's too small for you guys, let me know. Let's go next. A closer look. Good job creating links with the anchor element. Creating links with the anchor element is a fundamental web development skill. The diagram to the right illustrates the different parts of the anchor element syntax. In the diagram, notice the following. Any valid URL can be used for the value of the href attribute. The URL must be enclosed with quotation marks. Text between opening anchor and closing anchor tags can be as few or as many words as you would like. Click next to learn how to add images to the web page. And just real quick, we can look at this. It is our anchor element. The attribute name is href. The attribute value is this google.com/maps. And then link text, use Google Maps. And this would appear in blue by default usually, and you got your closing tag. So let's go next. So adding images. Finally, we get to add cool imagery to our page. To add images to a web page, use the HTML image element. So we have an image element here. Just like websites have URLs, images on the web also have URLs. Image URLs typically end with the .jpg or .png file extension. The source attribute sets the source for an image element. Image elements are self-closing, which means they do not need a closing tag. Let's use an image element to add a photograph to our web page. So our instructions say in index.html, which is here, we're there. We got main.css also, but we are looking in here. On the line below the paragraph element, so here's the line below. Add an image element. Use the following as the image URL. So here we do image, and then an image takes the attribute source src, and we give it the value of this URL. And just so you guys can see what that URL does is it takes us to this picture here. all we're doing is linking to that picture by adding it to our image tag. Image tag is self-closing, which means that, as you guys can see, you don't have to do like a IMG. It's just simply closed, / and then the bracket. I believe you could also leave off the /, but let's go based on what we were told in the instructions. Remember, the URL must be enclosed in quotes, which we did. Put it in quotes. Click Run to view the image in the web browser. Run. If we make this nice and big, we can see it. We have our link. It's amazing how a simple picture can just change your whole site. Okay, so let's try and do this, do that. Okay, number 2, want to change the photo that the image element displays, simply set the value of source to a different photo's URL. So, if we wanted to do something like cool bikes, and I did something like images, and I did something like that, and I did something like boom, copy. Look how cool our website's gonna look in a matter of seconds. Booyah. Add that. Let's run it again. Kind of a huge picture, but that's basically how it works. Find an image and link to it. If you have your own image, you would just add it into your local folder and link to it in the URL here. Kind of like they did with this link of cities.html. This is a local folder or file. So if you have a local file, image file, you would do the same thing here, add it locally. Sorry about that, let me put my phone on silent. Okay. So they're yelling because I used my own picture. Let's add theirs back. Run this. I want to change. Here's another photo. Now they want us to use this image. We'll put it here. And now we can run a. Thanks for joining us. We all have the ability to be geniuses. God bless you as well, sir. Let us, okay, let's add that second. Did I use the second link? I'm pretty sure. Let's try it again. We'll go here, erase that, do source equals, and then add that there, run it. We did get our image and we did it pass, and now we have this beautiful image. So if I click next, so now we're getting to add a video. And again, we still haven't even started CSS or styling. This is all using HTML to structure content on our page. So add video. Awesome. The photo makes the web page much cooler. What's cooler than a photo? A video. The HTML video element can add video to a web page. So we have a video tag here and a closing video tag. As you guys can see, the video tag did have a closing video tag, unlike the image, which was self-closing. So the video element uses a number of attributes. Let's take a look at them. So the video tag takes width height controls source, and type. So within height, set the size of the screen that displays the video. Controls adds play, pause, and volume control. That was something I recently found out, that we can actually control the controls. Sometimes you might not want to have controls. But yeah, there's also a source, which sets the URL of the video to play. Type specifies the different video formats, such as MP4, AVIs, and so forth. Instructions. In index.html, delete the image element so we can use that space on the web page for a video. Click Run. So in index.html, delete the image element, which is here. We're going to delete it so we can use that space for our video. So let's run this. Next, below the paragraph element, create a video element. So here, we do video element. The video will need width, height, control, and source. So, since we need a width, we should probably do what they did here, which was a 320. And we give it a height of 240. We could actually give our own, but we'll just be safe and also add, what am I missing here? Oh, like that. Wait, no. That is here, and then we do this, and this is like that. And then we have controls. And then we have source equals. I think they want it to be a source set to this URL. We copy this, put it in here, and then we want to close it out, right? So let's look at there. They did this, and then under it, they just closed the video. So as you guys can see, source here is nested within our video tag, and the source takes the attribute of source and then the value of the URL we want to show. Again, if it was a file located locally, then you would simply just link to it here, like we did here. So next, below the paragraph element, create a video element. Use the code above as a guide. Oh, that's actually what we did. Okay, so let's run this. So we do have our video here. We did pass. If I do play this, we have it. If you guys want to mess with this a little bit, let's go to 420, and over here we'll go 100 more, so 340. Let's run it one more time. It's a little bit bigger. Still works. Still works. So that's adding video. If I go next, unordered lists are also very important. Impressive. With just 5 page elements, you've already created an interesting website. Another essential HTML element is the unordered list. Items in an unordered list are referred to as list items. Each item is bulleted, not numbered. For example, a list, a second list item, a third list item. The HTML code for the list above, we have the unordered list, and inside of there we nest these 3 tags of list items, and that's what produced this here. About unordered list. UL tags create the unordered list. LI tags contain each list item. So unordered list elements can be used to organize content on a web page in a number of ways. Below, we will use one to organize our website's navigation menu, sometimes called a Navbar. instructions, our navbar will go above the company heading h1 element. So first we will need to create some new lines. In index.html, press enter to create several new lines between body and h1. So in index.html, press enter to create several new lines between body and h1. Body, I guess that's what they want. Alright, press enter. Okay, first we will create an h2 element to serve as the heading for the navbar. So I'm guessing all they want me to do is do h2 ollie h2. Let's run. We did pass. Below the navbar h2, create an unordered list element. The list items will be different pages a site user can visit. So here, we're going to do a UL, enter. We're doing list items. So let's, oops, control, oh, I am messing up. Let's paste these. We're going to put sign up, search bikes, reserve a bike, and about us. Let's not forget to close our UL, run. We do see we have our unordered list right under our H2. If I go ahead and go next now. So parent and child elements. With the video and unordered list elements, you may have noticed something interesting. These HTML elements had other HTML elements nested inside of them. For example, in unordered lists, li elements are nested inside the UL, and then we have two LIs inside of there. Web developers refer to the enclosing elements as the parent element and the enclosed elements as children. Referring to HTML elements as parents and children may sound funny, but it's a core web development concept. The web browser also knows about these parent-child relationships, which will be important as we explore CSS in the next lesson. So just remember, whenever you see an element and there's things within that element, the outer element is the parent and the inner element are childs, or the children of that parent element. These would be siblings. These LIs are siblings. So referring to HTML elements as parents and children may sound funny, but it's core web development concept. Again, just repeating that because it's important. Okay, in the diagram to the right, notice the following. The UL element is the parent of each LI. The LI element are children of the UL. Code indentation signifies a relationship between parent and child elements. After you familiarize yourself with the diagram, click Next to continue. Add a div. Now that we know about HTML element nesting and parent-child relationships, let's see another way these concepts are applied on a real-life web page. Div elements divide your page by enclosing other elements. These enclosed groups of elements can then be organized, moved, and styled independently from one another. Div elements are often used with the class attribute. Here's an example. So we have a div, and it has a class, main. Note the ... indicates where other HTML elements would normally be enclosed by the div. Below, we will use divs to divide our page into 3 separate parts. So just think of divs as kind of like dividers. that let us separate our content into parts where we can apply styling or functionality through code based on these dividers. Class is just a way to identify the name of a certain divider. Below, we will use divs to divide our page. Okay. Instructions. We will enclose all the elements between body and the closing body in a div element with a class attribute of container. So all the HTML elements you added in the previous exercise should be inside the opening div class container. So the navbar h2, let's start right here. We're going to do div class equal to container, close it. So we want the navbar ULs, the company heading h1, which is there, the tagline h3, the paragraph, the video, which goes all the way down to right here where the closing body is. So we want to close our div there. So now all of our content, we should tab this so it looks neater. So we could tell everything is nested inside of the div. The div is the parent, and all this stuff in here are children. So click run. Notice the elements have shifted in the web browser. We'll fix this effect later on. Let's kind of stretch it out a little bit before running. Let's see, run it. So, like it said, we will fix this in the following lessons, but let's go to the next one now. Looks like it exploded. Next, we will enclose the navbar h2 and ul in another div and give it a class attribute of nav. You can use the code below as a guide. So, the navbar h2 and ul, so the navbar, it's going to be nav. It's going to be a div of class nav, and it has to go around the h2 and the ul, which is going to be our navbar. So here we close our div. We want to nest everything inside of there. So we go here. So as you guys can see, our div is the parent, the ul and the h2 are children nested within. So let us run this. So we did pass, click run. Notice that the navbar section now has a yellow background, and this was given through the CSS, which we haven't looked at, but we will know about soon enough. Finally, enclose the company h1 and h3 paragraph and video element inside a third div with the class attribute of main. So the h1 and the h3 are here, and they're telling us to do a div class equal to main, close it. They want it to go all the way down to the video element inside a third div. Okay, so we go under here, we do our div closing, and we want to make sure to indent this. I think it was here. Unless, I think I already did. I'm kind of confused with the indentation, but let's just do it anyways. It said h1, h3, so let's tab it. Okay. Feel free to use the code below as a guide. Pretty sure we got it. There will now be a total of 3 divs on the page. The div with the container class container, the divs with the nav and main classes. Click run. The file main.css contains CSS styling for the container, nav, and main classes, which enabled page elements to change. If you're curious, explore main.css for fun. We will learn how CSS works later in the course. So I'll give you guys a little quick look at how this is going on. So we have our main CSS here. We target different elements such as the HTML and the body element, which exist here. We have our HTML tag here and the body. So basically this different CSS rules will be applied to the HTML tag and the body. So anything within these will receive these. Okay, so let's see what else. We have classes. So we have the div of class nav, which is here. We target a class in CSS by dot syntax. So if I find dot, see we have this dot nav, dot main, dot container. Our first was we could actually look at our nav bar here. Dot nav has the background color. This is the background color for yellow, max with 25%. We could see it's 25% here. So that's how we apply certain rules that we don't want to apply to the whole page using these selectors or these classes. But that's just a little bit concerning CSS. We will go more in depth in following lessons. Let us click next. So metadata, the brains. So the last HTML elements we will explore are involved in metadata processes. You can think of these elements as the brains of a web page because they communicate vital information to the web browser, but are not visible to a web page visitor. Doc type HTML tells the web browser to expect an HTML document. We have HTML and the closing HTML, the root of the HTML document and parent of all other HTML elements of the web page. Then the head encloses other metadata about the site, such as its title. Title contains the site's title, which is one way users can find user site through a search engine like Google. Meta charset UTF-8 tells the web browser which character set to use. In this case, the character set is UTF-8. Instructions identify HTML head title meta charset UTF-8 elements and the doc type declaration. Note, in addition to the metadata elements described above, you will also notice link. You'll learn about link elements in the next unit, a closer look at CSS. Click next to review the skills learned in this lesson. So let's click next. So HTML review. Congratulations, you've learned enough HTML to create a great website. Before we move on to styling with CSS, let's review what we've learned in this lesson. Languages. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language and is used to give a web page structure. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets and is used to style HTML elements. HTML elements, H1 through H6, indicate text headings on a web page. H1 is the largest heading, H6 is the smallest. And here's an example of an H1 heading. P, used for non-heading text such as the body of articles or company descriptions. A, short for anchor and used to add links to other web pages. Anchor elements typically have an href attribute. And that's how we created a link. Image, used to add an image to a web page. Image elements are self-closing and do not require a closing tag. So image took that source attribute and then here's the value we gave it, which was a URL. Video, used to add videos to a web page and use multiple attributes and a nested source element. There's the source element that's nested inside the video. The video took the attributes, width, height, and controls. Unordered list used to create lists on a web page and requires list items elements inside a UL. We have a div used to organize HTML elements into different groups, which can be given a class attribute. Metadata tags provide metadata about a web page. Web concepts, parent-child elements used to describe HTML elements that enclose or are enclosed by other elements. For example, below, the UL is the parent and the LI items are children. Click up next to start learning about CSS. Might as well keep going. We're on a roll. So, why use CSS? CSS is a language used to style websites. Colors, fonts, and page layouts for a site can all be managed using CSS. The more comfortable you are with CSS, the better equipped you will be to create stylish and contemporary-looking websites. Instructions. The web browser shows a site styled with HTML and CSS. In this lesson, we will build the CSS from scratch. Click Next to get started, to continue, either way. Next, link to a style sheet. Take a look at the web browser. Technically, this is the same site you saw in the previous exercise. It contains the exact same HTML elements and content as before. What's missing? The CSS that we used to previously style the site has been unlinked. The HTML link element links a CSS file to an HTML file so that CSS styling can be applied. Here's an example of the link element. Link takes the attribute rel, type, and href. The link element uses three attributes. Rel specifies the relationship between the current file and the file being linked to. In this case, the relationship or rel attribute is Stylesheet. Type specifies the type of the link of the file linked to. So the type is text CSS. href provides the URL of the file being linked to, main.css. 2. Like the HTML image element, link is self-closing. It does not need a closing tag. In the example above, main.css is an external style sheet. Using external style sheets is one of the most popular ways to write CSS. Inline CSS is another method. Let's use the link element to connect index.html and main.css. Inside the head element of index.html, insert a link element that connects index.html and main.css. Use the code snippet above as a guide. Click Run and notice the effect in the browser. So for you guys to be able to kind of like see this or understand it, if you guys had a folder with an index.html file that you create, you just create a file called index.html and then a file called main.css, and you edit the content of those files, you would add, because we have, let's say this is our folder on our desktop and it contains these two files, index.html and main.css, how can we get them to link to each other? Like how can we use the styling we use in here over here? So we would add, we got to insert a link element that connects index HTML and main CSS. So, like it says, where does it want us to put it? Inside the head. So we can just go here and do, doesn't really matter where you put it. You can put it anywhere and it will work. We are going to do something similar to this, and you do see it's self-closing as the image was. So we want to do our link there and then just close it and have a rel equals style sheet type equals text CSS href equals main.css. So let's make sure we linked correctly. Yep, main CSS, everything should be good. Now once I run this, if everything was done correctly, all the styles in here that apply to the elements here will be applied. Let us run. And as you guys can see, we now have those styles applied. Okay. So we pass. Let us go next. Anatomy of a CSS rule. Awesome job. Now main.css is linked to index.html. Before we start writing our own CSS, let's take a look at how CSS code works. The diagram to the right shows the anatomy of a CSS rule. 1. Rule. A list of CSS instructions for how to style a specific HTML element or group of HTML elements. 2. A selector specifies exactly which HTML element to style. Here, h1 is the selector. We see it here, h1. Properties and values located inside the curly brackets. Properties and values specify what aspects of the selector to style. In the diagram's example, the color property is set to red, which will display all h1 elements in red. Click next to continue. So this is just what we've seen inside our .css file. And we just select elements from the HTML file. We put them inside curly braces and specify the rule or the property color, and we give it the value of red. Let's go next. Okay. Closer look at CSS. Font family. One of the most effective ways to enhance the look and feel of a website is by changing the font. In CSS, font is managed using the font family property. So we have h1. Font family is what we're going to change in the h1. We're giving it Georgia, and then if for some reason the browser doesn't have Georgia, it will go to serif. So above the font family property of the h1 selector is, above the font family property of the h1 selector is set to the value of Georgia with serif as a fallback font. Fallback fonts are included in case a visitor's web browser does not support the first font. Sometimes more than one fallback font is included. Instructions. The Mistwood Publisher website could be improved with more stylish font. In main.css, locate the h1 selector inside the curly brackets, add. So main.css, we want to go to the h1 here. We want to do font family, do Palatino, Lino type, and then serif. Click run and notice the change to the words Mistwood Publisher, which is here at the top. Let's run that. And we see a very slight difference, but that is how we would change the font family for h1. If we want to do the h2, we would add it to the h2. Let's see, let's go next. Color. So the new font looks great. However, black is not your only option when it comes to font color. In CSS, the color property sets the color of a CSS selector's font. h1 color red. CSS comes equipped with 140 named colors such as red, used above. For many situations, these named colors will suffice. However, web developers who want to get even more exact with their color choices can use hexadecimal and RGB color values. 1. Hexadecimal color, which is what we've seen for that yellow. Hexadecimal values that represent mixtures of red, green, and blue. For example, red can be expressed with the hexadecimal value of FF 0000. The value FF represents red, 00 represents green, and 00 represents blue. RGB, red, green, blue colors. Color, created by 3 numbers representing red, green, and blue. When mixed together, the 3 values create a specific color. For example, purple can be represented as RGB 1280 128. Instructions. H1 heading elements on the Miss Wood publishing websites are colored black by default. Let's change them to red. In main.css, locate H1 selector directly underneath the line of code where you added the font family property, add color red. Here, H1, we want to do color red, run. We get red. Replace red with different named color. Here are some options. Let us change it to deep sky blue. Run. Deep sky blue. Hex color provide millions of different shades of colors. Try replacing the name color with one of the hex values below. Let us do this. Here, hash, paste, run. We get another type of blue. The hex colors listed in the previous step can also be created using RGB. Try this out by swapping out the hex color value on the left for the RGB value of the right. So which one did I use? I used that one. So let's try switching it to that. We'll do that. Run. Okay. Okay. Let's go next. Css Class Selectors. Up to this point, we've used CSS to select an HTML element by its tag name only. However, we can use class selectors to target classes of HTML elements. Consider the HTML below. We have this div class header, got an H2 and a paragraph nested in it. Here the div is the parent element and the H2 and P are the children. CSS styles applied to the header class selector will automatically apply to the H2 and P. So again, CSS applied to our header class will be applied to the H2 and P. So we have, where is that? Here, class header, everything inside it will also receive those CSS styles. Here's a refresher on parent and child elements. We already remember how those work. In CSS, class selectors can be identified by a dot, followed by a class name, as seen below. We got dot header, and then we give it a color, hash, all Fs. As a result of this code, child element of divs with the header class will have a font color of white. Below, we will use CSS class selector to style more than one HTML element at once. Instructions. Websites often use more than one font family. In index.html, the H2 heading and paragraph elements are contained inside a div with a class of hero. So in index.html, H2 heading and paragraph are contained inside this div hero. In main.css, add properties for the .hero class selector. So .hero, we're going to change the font family, and we're going to do trebuchet. I don't know what that is. MS. Okay. Semicolon. Oh, we want a fallback. So our fallback, comma. Oh, there's going to be, yep, 2 of them. So, and then Helvetica and Sans Serif. Okay. Important in main CSS, 2 properties, padding margin are seen in the .hero selector. We will cover these in Unit 3, CSS Boundaries and Spacing. Click Run to view your changes in web browser. Notice, okay, let's just run this. We did pass. Notice how child elements of the div with class hero now appear in the new font. Well, and as we can see, we do see the dot hero, which again was H2 and P, which is here and here. Let us go next. Font size. The size of the text has an impact on how users experience a website. The font size property sets the size of an HTML element's text. We have font size. In the CSS above, font size is set to 60 pixels, and CSS size can be assigned in pixels, rems, or ems. Pixel, rem, and em. Pixel, standard unit of measurement for sizing fonts and other HTML elements. Rem represents the default font size of the web browser. Rems can be used to ensure that HTML elements scale in proportion to each other on various web browsers and screen sizes. On most web browsers, 1 rem is equivalent to 16 pixels, 2 rem is equivalent to 32, 3 rem is equivalent to 48, and so on. M, a relative value that changes in proportion to the size of the parent element. For example, if a parent element has a font size of 20, child elements with font size 1em would be equivalent to 20 pixels. Child elements with font size 0.5em would be equivalent to 10 pixels, and so on. We will primarily explore pixels and rem values since these are the most commonly used today. Instructions: the H2 heading for the Miss Wood Publishing website would be more impressive if its font size were larger. In main.css, locate the H2 selector and set font size to 48 pixels. Main CSS, locate H2, make it 48 pixels, run. We have it now bigger. Okay, 48 pixels may still be too small for a heading. Change the font size value of the H2 selector to 56 pixels. H2, 56, run, getting bigger. Now let's get some experience using rem values in main CSS. For the P selector here, we're doing font size to rem. Run this. Okay, now let's resize anchor elements that are children of elements with the hero class using em values. In main, locate the .hero a, .hero a here. Change the font size property. Already has it. So we're changing this font size to 1.25em. So I want you guys to see what's going on here. Here, when we resize things, the font stays the same with the hero class, which again was here, and then the A element in there would be this read now. Right now it's just that one size all the time. When we change it to this relative value, which where was it? .hero a, and we do 1.25em, it should now change according to how the size of its parent elements. So that's pretty cool. Because if you're looking at a site from a certain screen that's way too small and you're using an absolute value, a pixel, it's going to look really huge on a small screen versus on a really big screen. It might kind of appear small. So using ems and rem values is much better to get a much more responsive view. So let's go next. A background image. In CSS, the background image property sets a background image of your choice for a given selector as seen below. We have the .hero class. We're doing a background image with this URL. The CSS rule above assigns the image hosted at here to elements that have a class attribute set to hero. To control the size of the chosen background image, use the property background size as seen below. So we have background image, and then we do background size. We do cover, which should cover the whole element. Here we have specified that we want the image to completely cover elements within the hero class. Instructions. Let's add a background image to the Miss Wood Publishing homepage. In main.css, locate the .hero class selector. Here, .hero class selector. Inside the rule, insert a background image. Here is a URL for a great photo to use. Here, we do what they did up here, which was background image, and we're going to give it a URL, and then they're going to ask next time for a background size. No, we'll do that once we run it. Okay, they want us to use this URL. So first, let's remember the hero class is this down here, so we should expect to see that change once I go in here, add quotes, add that, run this. I think it only said, yeah, that first part, so run that. Now we have that background in there inside of hero. So next, in the web browser, you may notice that the background image seems rather close up. We can make it so that more of the image is seen by using the background size property. In main.css, in the .hero selector property, or in the .hero selector below the background image property, add background size cover. This will make it look a lot nicer. We go this way. We're going to do a background size cover. Run this. And now we can move this. It looks a lot nicer. Finally, now that the background image covers the .hero div, the black font color makes it difficult to read the text of the H2 and P. In main CSS, give the .hero selector color property of FFF, which is the hex code for white. So here we go into .hero color white. Run. Much easier to read. Let us go next. CSS ID selectors. The background image makes a big difference. Nice work. Previous exercise introduced CSS class selectors to style HTML elements of specific classes. What if a web page design calls for an individual page element to be styled uniquely, but all other elements of that kind to be styled a different way? For example, to style one anchor element differently than all other on a web page, you could use the HTML ID attribute, similar to a class, except IDs are usually used when you want to like target a unique element and apply CSS uniquely to that element. Then in the CSS file, you can create a rule for the ID selector using a hash symbol. So we have an anchor ID learn code. In our CSS file, we would do hash symbol learn dash code and then just apply our rule like it shows us here. So okay, about using an ID attribute can only be used once because the ID is unique to the element it's assigned to. IDs have a greater specificity than classes, which just means like priority. If an HTML element is using both ID and class attributes, the CSS rule for the ID will take precedence over that of the class. Below, we will use an ID selector to style a single HTML element differently than the others of that kind on the web page. So in the exercise titled 6 font size, we enlarged the font size property for paragraph elements. This unintentionally increased the size of the paragraph, which reads 2006 Mistwood Publishers Limited at the bottom of the web page. We can use an ID attribute to fix this. In index.html, locate the paragraph element mentioned above. Set the ID to footer. Paragraph ID equals footer. Click run. 2. In main.css, add a new ID selector. Down here, hashtag, footer, curly braces, run. Give footer a font size of 0.75 rem, run. And now we have nice small font here for our paragraph. Let's go next. Congratulations, you earned a new achievement. Lesson completed. A closer look at CSS. So we actually knocked down HTML and CSS. You guys, I think it's been like an hour or so. Yeah, but this is pretty cool. An hour and 12 minutes. Let's see. It says review. Congratulations, you worked hard and made it to the end of a challenging lesson. There were a lot of new concepts. So let's take a look at what we've learned. Web concepts. CSS is a language used to style websites. Colors, fonts, and page layouts for a site are managed using CSS. CSS Selector specifies exactly which HTML elements to style. Class selectors used to target classes of HTML elements. ID selectors used to style an HTML element which has an ID attribute. Let's see, external style sheet, CSS file that styles an HTML file externally via the HTML link element. And that's just how we were able to connect our CSS to our HTML. By linking it in the HTML file, we use that link tag that had the rel, the type, and was it href? I already forgot. But you guys can look back and check that out. Let's just click up next. So boundaries and space. Learn how CSS can manage boundaries and space on web pages. I think I will have to come back to this one. I think you guys got enough knowledge to practice and try to come up with a nice little website. I will continue doing these probably, if not this weekend, then Monday for sure. I'm going to try to be more consistent on going live. That way if you guys have trouble, you guys could ask questions right there on the chat. But I'm signing out now. Glad that you guys joined, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Now, how do I turn this off?